I don't know why. I don't know why Ed does this. I'm not sure exactly why. You'll notice that my voice doesn't seem too excited to do this recap. I don't want to do this to Ed. I do not. But Ed has a pattern. He has a pattern of making ridiculous proposals in fantasy. In 2015, can you believe that after losing the first game against me, Ed made this goofy video about how he wants to propose that we face each other every week. He wanted to propose that to the commish. Last year, Ed made a ridiculous post in the chat and said that when we face each other, the loser should quit their job. He actually did that, by the way. And just yesterday, Ed, out of nowhere, is proposing that we should wage money on our Week 13 matchup. I don't want to do this. You can hear how reluctant I am in my voice. It hurts me deeply because Ed is so painfully obvious that when he feels that he has the upper hand, he wants to be the big guy. He wants to be the big man. And always bringing up these straw man arguments. Always bringing up some side issue so he can take a victory on that issue, and that somehow validates his team. But it doesn't. Because if the stats don't prove that you're the better team, then of course you would jump to such a ridiculous claim and say that we should bet money on it so I can finally feel something again. Peggy? When I met up with Ed a couple of weeks ago, I spotted him at a mall. Ed looked very melancholy. I walked up to him, and this is no joke. I actually told him, hey, we need you in the chat. Ed's response to me was, I'm busy, so I just haven't really been talking. He didn't say anything about, I wasn't aware that there wasn't a chat. Ed didn't say anything like that. And then just yesterday, or 2 days ago, Ed had said that he wasn't aware that there was one on GroupMe. Paul then let Ed know that there was a GroupMe chat last year, Ed. I don't know why Ed lies. I'm kind of confused. What I'm not confused about is at the time when Ed and I met up, Ed was in a losing streak. Week 6, Week 7, and Week 8, he lost 3 straight games. And again, he was reminded in person that there is a chat. Come talk in the chat. We are talking about you. Ed didn't show up. Just this week, Ed put up his best game. He scored 117 points. Cam had his season high with 35. DeMarco had his season high with 25. Ed is about to face Eric this week. He's won 2 games in a row. This is the best part of Ed's season. This is the highest point for him. So what does he do? Ed does exactly what he always does. So let's get back to this wager. I'm going to play you guys a clip from Ed's message to me. The message that I don't really want to get into, but I guess we'll have to. First of all, I have to say that it's kind of obnoxious that you won't turn down the volume, but that's besides the point. He mentions that he listens to the recap every week, though for whatever reason, he still didn't know that there was a chat. The chat is mentioned quite often in the recaps, and he didn't know. What do you guys think? Ed also then claims that I'm bragging about my record and that I'm saying that my team is so great. I'm not saying my team is great. Look at the papers, my friend. I have 1,021 points. You have 812. That's a difference of 209 points. You average 81 points a week. If I didn't play, if I sat out 2 weeks and a half, we might be tied. That's how far ahead of you I am in scoring, Ed. You're 5th in the league in scoring. I'm not saying my team is better. If you look at the papers, my team just is better. And what's this silly thing that you always seem to think that if I faced your team, things would be different? Well, let's dial back all the weeks. If I faced you, I think I would have lost one more game. My record would still be superior to yours. So why would it be any different if I faced your team? Your team that is in a battle with Joe to take over the division. I lose, and I'm still at the top. Let's make one thing clear, Ed. I lost to Orlando in a very close game. Now, for the remainder of the season, all I have to do is win this week and outscore Orlando the rest of the way. And right now, Orlando has 850 points. Just 38 points more than you. That's about 170 points. He's not going to catch me. And I face Hensel this week. So ask yourself, what team has to prove what to who? Why would I make a wager when we don't even make wagers in this league? It's not the culture of the league, Ed, but you knew what you were doing. You understood that if you bought up this straw man like you always seem to, you can take a bit of a victory in knowing that your stupid proposals are never challenged, and that somehow means that you won something. Why would I bet something on a game that by the time we face each other means nothing to me? And facing you means nothing. I only have one true rivalry with one person in this league, and that's Jay. I have to remind you of that all the time when you seem to just take a direct shot at me. Never take any shots at anyone else. Kind of makes me feel bad. Kind of makes me feel like you think that our teams are somehow on the same level, and I don't think so, Ed. So I don't want to talk about this anymore. And you know what? I'm not. But never mind all that. This is your Week 10 recap. And what I want to bring up right now is the El Caporal division, which is where everything is pretty much happening. At the top of the El Caporal division, we've got Joe at a record of 6-4. Ed in second place with a 6-4 record. Dad Bod at 5-5. You've been Cosby'd at 4-6, and Pedro bringing up the rear at 3-7. Pedro technically is not eliminated, but might as well be eliminated due to circumstances that he has no control over, due to points that he's just not going to get out of his ass. Pedro has almost solidified the number one pick for the 2018 season. I do want to mention that on the other side of the coin, on the number one division, which is currently being dominated by Peggy, Paul has somehow crept his way into the playoff picture, because if the playoffs started today, you would have Paul seeded at 6 going up against Orlando, who's seeded at 3. Winner of that matchup would be going up against Joe. And on the other side, you've got Dad Bod against Ed, and his long-awaited matchup with me. All his matchups with me are long-awaited for whatever reason. I think Ed loves me. The winner of that matchup would be facing Peggy in round number 2. So Paul's given himself a fighting chance, and it's so adorable to watch him do that. However, Paul, I don't think it's going to make a difference. The games that you have coming up, you are going up against Andy, Joe, and Jay. One would assume that you have control over that, but the fact that you have your 2-3 wins behind some of these teams, it's going to make it very difficult. I'm sorry, your 2 wins behind most of these teams. I think it's going to be very difficult because your team hasn't really proven to be that strong before. So if that's all we have to compare it to, it's not me taking a personal attack at you, Paul. It's because I don't think you're gonna make it. That's another thing too, Ed. I mean, if there's anybody that's gotten more venom on these recaps, it's been Paul, without a doubt. I mean, it's probably been Paul. Then after that, Jay, who's always, he's always in the top two. Then maybe Andy, then Orlando, and then maybe you. But nobody's really giving you much of any shit. So the fact that you would call me out is quite hurtful, and never mind. I got to try to cope with it. Also, on a side note, the waiver pickups, I remind you guys at this point of every season, I try to remind you guys and let you guys know that waiver pickups are very important, and the limit is always at 30. I'm a big fan of the limit of the waiver pickup. I think if that weren't the case, there would be so many more waiver pickups. It would be fucking annoying. But the fact that we put a cap on it, I was always for that. We have 3 teams that are pretty close to that limit. The rest of us are in the teens, and one of us is in single digits. Orlando has 22 waiver pickups. We've got Andy with 22 as well, and Paul with 28. I'm going to take it right back to Paul because he's obviously tried. He's put forth some sort of effort this year. It's not like he's just sitting back and watching his team do shit. Most of Paul's team is made up of free agency pickups. I mean, he's got LaShawn McCoy, he's got Mark Ingram, and he's got his kicker, and those are pretty much the only consistent draft picks that he plays. Just those 3. As opposed to the owner who has 3 waiver pickups, and that's our dear friend Ed, who isn't getting the greatest performance out of his players, but somehow feels that he shouldn't go digging into the player pool. Ed is playing Matt Ryan. This week he's got Cam, who he also drafted. He's got Matt Ryan. He's got DeMarco Murray, Joe Mickens, Alshon Jeffrey, AJ Green, Sterling Shepard. I have no clue why he's still on Ed's squad. He's got Kyle Rudolph. He only has 2 players that he plays, 2 positions that he plays, and that's his second kicker, because of course Ed has 2 kickers, and the Eagles defense. Other than that, everything that Ed plays is a draft pick. He also changes Marshawn Lynch, who he also drafted. So Ed clearly hasn't done enough to make his team better with only 3 pickups. I mean, a lot of us are in like the 14s, the 13s, 10, 11, and then you have those top tier teams that I mentioned with Orlando, Paul, and Andy. But that again shows how Ed's sort of been a bit of a negligent owner in that sense, because he hasn't been paying enough attention to his team. He couldn't honestly say that his team's been performing great, especially after that losing 3 games in a row. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But let's move on to these Week 10 games. You had Turtle Power defeating me 78-76. And as I said in the chat, I mean, this pretty much tells you how, yes, Orlando beat me. That's fine. That's fine. Orlando beat me. You can lose to inferior teams. That's cool. But it really says something about Orlando's team when Devin Funchess, I thought his name was Darren, when Devin Funchess gets the game-winning touchdown and all you see is memes about Cam Newton. My point to Jay was that if Antonio Brown would have gotten the game-winning touchdown, there'd be no memes about Ben Roethlisberger, because Antonio Brown stands on his own because he's a great fantasy player. But Orlando's players are kind of represented by the guys who feed them. You see? They're bottom feeders. That's what Orlando's players are. And that's how I'm going to feel better about losing. All right? So deal with it. We also had Eric losing 44-115 to Mr. Dadbod. Horrible, horrible loss for Eric, and a season that also is just going to shit. As I mentioned, we had 114-68, a victory for Paul over Dro. Hensel loses to Joe 69-90, and Andy loses to Ed. Ed's triumphant victory. his greatest piece of work, 117-64. Ed is the highest scoring team of the week, and Eric is the lowest scoring. We move on to the week 11 matchups, and it's Peggy going up against Hensel. And as I said, it's very likely that I will defeat Hensel, and all I have to do is outscore Orlando the rest of the way. So it's pretty much looking like I won't have a meaningful game in about 3 weeks. We also have Ed going up against Eric, which was part of the reason why Ed spoke. I just really don't appreciate this. I really don't appreciate. What I don't appreciate the most about what Ed did was that it reinforces what I say all the time, and it's that when it's convenient to you, that's when you decide to say something. When you just want to talk shit, when you feel like you're at the top of a mountain, then you want to talk shit. You'd be a horrible poker player, Ed, because you would only play hands that were strong hands. If you have a full house, you're going to play a full house. You're not going to bluff. You don't believe in bluffing. You have to believe in bluffing if you're going to talk shit. You have to. You can't just win 2 games in a row and then figure you're going to beat Eric, and then it's like you're all excited because you're 6-4, and now you want to jump on the chat to say something. It's so lame. So you get no respect for that, Ed. We've got Paul going up against Andy, the Cop Bowl. Orlando up against Dro. That's not going to be a pretty one. Even though it's projected to be quite a close game, with Dro having the upper hand at 89-92. And then we have Dad Bod up against Joe. These are big games for the El Caporal division, because you could definitely see Ed winning and beating Eric and having a record of 7-4, and then say if the best thing that could happen for Ed and the division is Jay losing. Jay has so many more points than the rest of you that he's just got that extra victory. So the more you guys can suppress him, the better. Ed would be more beneficial for Ed to keep going alongside of Joe than it would Jay, who I said weeks ago, okay? I said weeks ago that Jay was the better team in that division. So don't get your panties in a bunch, guys. So that's pretty much your week 11 matchups. This paper's coming right at you. And that's all there's pretty much to say. I lost a pretty close game. It hurt. Funches did what he had to do. Orlando had to get the best performance out of Funches to defeat me, because sometimes that's how it's got to be. That's how it's got to be, First time we lost, it was, it was terrible assortment of buys, and now a close game. So I feel pretty good going into week 11 that we will wrap up that motherfucking division and just wait for that bye. But never mind all that, because as always, may your quarterbacks get hurt before they leave the locker room, may your running backs pull their hamstrings, and may your wide receivers get arrested for marijuana possession. Go fuck yourselves.